Everyone thinks they know what's going to replace Kingda Ka in 2026, but all I know is that it's gonna be something insane. You rip out the tallest coaster in the world, no matter what the reason, you gotta replace it with something crazy. So when Great Adventure says they're getting a record-breaking launch coaster in 2026, I know I can get excited. The floor is Veloci Coaster, and something better than that would be unimaginable. A worthy replacement for Kingda Ka needs to be record-breaking, and it definitely needs to be at least 300 feet tall. But it also needs to fix the two main issues Kingda Ka had. Kingda Ka wasn't just blown up without thought. It made a lot of sense for them to do that, and it was a very calculated move. Replacing it though will be an even more calculated and even better thought out move, and I think the chain is gonna shock us all when they announce a truly insane, well-worthy replacement later this year. To figure out Kingda Ka's replacement, we need to understand the pros and cons of the roller coaster and the reason the park opted to remove it. Let's start off with the cons. The first con is re-rideability. Kingda Ka is not a super re-rideable ride. It's a super short ride that is pretty intense, and though us coaster enthusiasts might love to ride it over and over again, to the average guest, Kingda Ka is sort of a one and done attraction. Wait in line, experience the attraction, achieve the world record, and move on. There's no incentive to do this ride again. It isn't long at all, and it's super popular, so it always gets a long line. It's also pretty intense and has serious maintenance issues, which is the second major con this ride had. The park constantly had to pour millions of dollars into upkeep for this attraction to make sure it could stay around, and it required a ton of staff on standby to properly operate and maintain the ride. The ride often went down for weather as well, and often couldn't operate in rainy or windy weather. That means many guests get disappointed as they traveled for hours just to get that world record, only to be disappointed that the ride is closed for weather or maintenance. Which brings us to the main pro of Kingda Ka, which was obviously the records. The point of a record-breaking attraction at an amusement park is obviously to drive ticket sales and get guests to make that trip to the park. If a ride isn't driving people through the front gate, then it's useless. Unless of course it's a solid supporting attraction which keeps guests happy and keeps them staying in the park for longer, leading to them spending more money and having a better overall experience. That's why Kingda Ka got removed. It no longer was serving its purpose. It didn't have as long of a line as it used to have in its first few years of opening, and it wasn't driving enough ticket sales to be worth the annual maintenance budget this ride required of approximately $1 million a year. If Kingda Ka isn't bringing guests to the park and it isn't keeping them in the park, then it's no use for the park. Great Adventure's attendance the last few years has been horrible, and it had been performing way worse than the other large parks in the legacy Six Flags chain. That means Kingda Ka, as fun as it was, wasn't bringing guests to the park, which meant it was time to replace it with something that would. Now, while I may be defending the decision to remove Kingda Ka, I think the way they did it was disgusting and foolish. The park should have given people ample warning to get their final rides on the world's tallest coaster, and they should have given it a proper send-off. They probably also would have been able to sell a ton of tickets for the last few operating days of the ride, and they could have used the ride's closure to bring a ton of more guests to the park during a time when they really needed that. But that's all in the past now, and I'm sure the park and chain will learn from their mistakes. Heading back to 2026, the ride replacing Kingda Ka needs to have the pros the ride had and hopefully not have the cons. To open a record-breaking coaster, all the park has to do is go over 325 feet, and then it's the tallest coaster in the country other than Top Thrill 2. I'm sure they'd be able to figure out a way to market that, maybe counting this as the tallest fully forward coaster, as Top Thrill 2 heads forwards and backwards and has a vertical spike. No, a coaster over 325 feet isn't Kingda Ka in the numbers, but if they did it right, they could make it a lot better. I don't believe the average guest will be able to feel the difference between the 3 seconds of Kingda Ka's 456 foot height and the few seconds of this new attraction's height, even if it's 100 feet shorter. The new coaster would also look massive, and if they gave it a more extended layout, they could make it look a lot more grand than Kingda Ka. The cons Kingda Ka had were rewritability and maintenance, and those are pretty easy to solve. For starters, they need to make sure this new ride has a reliable manufacturer that's done this before, is a reliable model that can have super high capacity and can offer a very comfortable ride experience. A longer layout with good theming will help to make this ride more re-rideable and make it the attraction every guest feels like they must do on every visit. It can drive front gate sales and bring people to visit the park multiple times a season, and as long as it fits the criteria we discussed, it will be a worthy successor to Kingda Ka. The only question now is, what is the perfect ride that fits this criteria that is also a launch coaster? So there are very few manufacturers capable of going over 300 feet reliably with high capacity. I don't think anyone outside of these 5 manufacturers would even be considered for a massive project like this. Those are Intamin, B&M, Vekoma, Mack Rides, and Premier Rides. B&M's Giga model doesn't feature a launch, so unless the park wants B&M to build them a 300-foot launched wing coaster, B&M is off the table. That leaves 4 manufacturers. Intamin by far has the most experience with this area. They've done the most coasters over 300 feet from any manufacturer, and they've done a ton of launch coasters. Kingda Ka was also an Intamin, so why not replace an Intamin with a better Intamin? The Cedar Fair people don't like Intamin, and they haven't worked with them in forever. But maybe Top Thrill 2 last year gave them a wake-up call, and maybe they're willing to welcome Intamin back into the chain. Legacy Six Flags purchased 2 Intamins just before the merger, and those 2 coasters are both opening under the Cedar Fair management, so maybe they'll open the door for potentially bringing Intamin in for this massive project. I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm definitely hoping it will. A 300-foot Veloci Coaster is a dream of a coaster, and it would definitely be a worthy successor to Kingda Ka. Now, what if the coaster only goes to 250 feet, but is a massive Mack Extreme Spinner? This could also be an epic, awesome option for the park's 2026 coaster. The Extreme Spinner is a beloved ride model, and making the totalest and best of it would definitely be big. I don't think the 400-foot half-baked strange extreme spinning coaster thingy is something that we'll see replace Kingda Ka though, and honestly, I really hope that's not what we're looking at for 2026. Mack can also do your classic multi-launch coaster, but I feel like today, if the chain was looking for that, they'd go with another manufacturer. Mack's launches are very weak compared to some of the other manufacturers, and sometimes that's a good thing. To replace Kingda Ka though, I think they're gonna want to go with something a bit more intense. I could see Vekoma come in here for this coaster, and even though the park just opened Flash, which is a 2nd generation Vekoma boomerang, they could make this massive coaster different enough from the Flash to make it work. Vekoma is definitely an option here, but Premier Rides is also. Canada's Wonderland just work with Premier Rides to build their headliner attraction, Alpine Fury, and it looks insane. The coaster has 9 inversions and goes close to 200 feet. I don't think Premier Rides will have a problem building a 300-foot coaster. The only thing I hope is that they give the ride proper capacity and don't do what they did for Canada's Wonderland with Alpine Fury, giving the coaster just 2 trains. If Premier Rides does manufacture this new massive Kingda Ka replacement, I also hope they do some more to modify those trains. They did a bit for Alpine Fury, but I really would love to see a brand new train design that's a lot more comfortable before I'd be completely sold on this being the park's massive 2026 attraction. I think Intamin, Mack, Vekoma, and Premier all have ride models and experience they could bring to the table for this 2026 attraction, and though I'd love for it to be an Intamin, any one of these could do wonders for the park as long as it's not some weird 400-foot half-baked spinning coaster. Please, Cedar Fair and Six Flags people, don't do something stupid to this park, and I believe they won't. I think the people in charge of the new Six Flags chain know exactly what they're doing, and I think they're gonna build Great Adventure into its full potential over the next few years, starting with this massive new coaster in 2026. I believe Great Adventure is headed down a 5-year path of massive expansion and growth, and I have an entire video on the secret plan the chain is already implementing to make the Great Adventure Resort the most popular theme park in that area of the country. Great Adventure is about to go for one of the craziest 5 years of theme park history, and if you live near the park, you're in for a real treat.